All right, we'll go ahead and get the committee started. First bill on the agenda today is Senate Bill 2567. Senator McMahon, you're recognized to explain the bill. Could you use your microphone, please, sir?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is the permitting legislation. And what we would do is basically on line 509, if you want to turn to that, it's the only change in the bill. It would create a new on premises tobacco permit, DOR. DOR ABC attorney helped write this legislation or write this amendment for this bill. And basically what it allows is for an on premises permit, which is premium tobacco. So there are a number of premium tobacco cigar bars that have opened up across North Mississippi, and it's become part of the game day celebrations at Ole Miss and Mississippi State, and it's become part of tourism in other towns. And what this does is, if you look specifically at line 517 and 518, 75% of the permittee's annual gross revenue has to be derived from the sale of premium tobacco, but it does not allow for the sale of cigarettes. Also, on line 520, it allows for food to be sold, but food may or may not be sold. But that's the explanation of the bill. It also, this does not override any local ordinances of any kind. So you still have home rule by your governing authorities, such as towns, cities, and counties. And I yield for any questions.
All right, are there any questions on the bill? Senator Chasnoff for question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Senator McMahon, you say that doesn't have to be the sale of food, but there's going to be the sale of alcohol?
These are premium cigars. They're business.
But I thought you mentioned alcohol. It has to be food sold if alcohol's.
Not by this permit. Food is not necessarily sold in a tobacco bar.
But isn't that against the state law?
No, ma'am. Not if we pass this. This is a new permit.
Well, you're changing.
This is a new permitting process for a premium tobacco bar. But yes, currently, yes, ma'am. I think that's current.
All right. I'm not trying to be difficult because, we've discussed this before, but I'm just wondering, does this apply to every other establishment in the state that sells alcohol as well? They'll be dancing in the streets if they don't have to sell food anymore.
No, ma'am. And you've been very helpful in passing new types of permits. For example, we passed festival permits, which is a short-term permit. That's legislation we passed over the last couple of years. We've also passed permitting to allow for the sale of alcohol at wineries and meaderies in the state. So this is just another permitting part of that.
Yes, sir. I'm just going back to the part that there is no food requirement.
That is correct. Just like there's no food requirement for a wine manufacturer either. And yet we sell the permits for tastings at wineries.
Yes, sir. We visited that meadery, which is a wonderful establishment. As I recall, they brought us some food to sample with the mead that they served.
They did provide some a charcuterie board to the best of my knowledge, but that's not their primary business. They did that just as they were hosting us at the event.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Chasnoff, there is on line 517, it does require them that 75% of the annual gross revenue must be derived from the sale of tobacco. So I think it prevents it from turning into a full-fledged bar.
That's correct. And it's premium tobacco, Mr. Chairman. It does not allow for cigarettes.
Correct.
Cigarettes are prohibited.
Yeah. You've heard an explanation of the bill. Are there any further questions on the bill? All right, seeing none Senator Carter for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering why there's a lawmaker from North Mississippi introducing this bill and not a lawmaker from the coast. No answer? Okay, I'm good.
Fair an opportunity.
You're
Any
welcome.
questions?
You can co-author it, Senator Carter.
Or motion? Motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Next on the agenda is Senate Bill 2568. Senator McMahon, you are recognized to explain the bill.
This is a simple amendment to the legislation we've passed in the past. There are 5 wineries in one meadery in the state of Mississippi. And the meadery is in North Mississippi is the only meadery in the state. And they make wine from honey. And it's been an overwhelming success. As a matter of fact, last year alone, 38,000 people went through the meadery. It's really incredible. That's more people that visited a brewery in Memphis on Bourbon Street. That tells you how much tourism has been generated and how many people are visiting this winery. Because of the success of this particular meadery, they have exceeded their capacity to manufacture at that location. So they have to move into an industrial site for more manufacturing capacity to ship within and out of the state. So what they're asking for is this will allow for them to still have one satellite location in the same county. And here's the reason for that, senators. They're currently in a retail area, but because they have exceeded the manufacturing capacity of that facility, they're going to have to move out into an industrial area, and that will not be conducive for tourists and visitors to come to the industrial area to visit. So this would allow them to still have their tasting and their retail shop in the same county with their manufacturing facility. Now yield for any questions.
Senator England, you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
You're recognized.
Thank you. Senator McMahon, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but did I hear you mention that these locations are needed to ship these products in and outside of the state?
That is correct.
Okay,
They've reached their orders exceed their manufacturing capacity.
Okay, so we allow in Mississippi wineries and other individuals to ship outside of our state?
We ship to other states, whatever their laws are.
I think that's an excellent idea. I'm glad those other states have those laws that allow that to happen so that our products can be shipped elsewhere. I almost wish we could do the same. Thank you, Senator McMahon.
I believe you do have a winery on the coast as well that would benefit from this if their manufacturing capacity, if their orders exceeded their manufacturing capacity.
Thank you, Senator England. Any other questions? Seeing none for a motion.
Title sufficient, do pass.
Motion is title sufficient, do pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Next up is Senate Bill number 2644. Senator Branning, if you would please.
Beale Street.
You're recognized to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill does 2 things very simply. First of all, it's some cleanup work. 2 years ago, you'll remember that we passed revisions to the harvest permit where we increased the weight limits from 84,000 to 88,000 pounds. I failed to bring forward all the appropriate code sections. So this is some cleanup work. I'm bringing forward code sections on line 61 and 66 to simply say that we're now at 88,000 pounds. The second thing the bill does is it allows harvest permit tag purchasers to be able to receive a 3% credit on their tag, just like the apportioned tag holders are able to do. You will see this language on line 479. So that is the explanation of the bill. I'm happy to yield for questions.
Senator McMahon for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairwoman, I'm gonna support your bill and vote for it, but do you think that you would entertain allowing some of these tags to be purchased at the local courthouses? Because it's my understanding currently they have to get their tags from they get their tag from the courthouse and they have to get their permit from, I believe, DOR.
That is an excellent point. I can tell you that I had conversations over the summer with some of the folks in the industry as well as some of the tax assessors, and I think that's going to be a little bit more involved than just making an amendment in committee. I'd like to keep talking to you about it because I do want to make this as convenient as possible for those people that do utilize the harvest permit tag for their businesses throughout the state.
Yeah, I'm sorry if my question was misleading. I didn't mean for it to be. I'm going to ride with you on this legislation, but I hope when we get it to the floor that you'll include that because it's frustrating for farmers to go to the courthouse and purchase their tag and then have to call DOR and get the permit. And some of the surrounding states had issued tickets, and you were helpful in helping unwind some of that mess last year, but thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any other questions on the bill? Motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. All right, next bill is Senate Bill 2801. I'm going to offer a reverse repealer in this bill. This will be our omnibus tag bill that we will use. I'm sure the House may have a vehicle also, but we'll designate this one as the vehicle for omnibus tag. If you have a tag for any of your constituents or groups in your district, please let me and Ian know pretty soon so we can compile a list, and we'll have a master list that everyone can come back and look at to make sure their tag is on the list. But right now, if there are no questions, I'm going to offer an amendment for a reverse repealer in this bill. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Any further questions on the bill? All right, motion is title sufficient. Committee sub. All those in favor say aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. That bill will be reported out. Next is Senate Bill 2803. This is a qualified resort area bill. It's going to be an omnibus qualified resort bill. I know that there are some different districts. I've had some members come up and ask about a resort status bill. This will be our designated omnibus resort status bill. So if you have a resort status issue in your district, please come see me and Ian so we can make sure we get it listed in the bill. So at this time, I'm going to offer an amendment for a reverse repealer in this bill. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Any further questions on the bill? Senator Bryan for a question or well, I believe it's Clarksdale. Excuse me, not Clarksdale. Yeah. I believe it's George County. George County. Okay. That's your amendment. Are there any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Are there any further questions on the bill? All right, seeing none for a motion. Motion is title sufficient to pass. Committee sub. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Next up, Senator Blunt. Senate Bill 2903. You're recognized to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next two bills have been requested by the Board of Trustees of the Public Employees Retirement System. I filed the bills at their request. The first bill is Senate Bill 2903, Mississippi Deferred Comp. It allows the deferred compensation plan, which is administered by PERS, to offer a Roth IRA as a vehicle for an employee. Deferred comp is completely voluntary. All of the other investment offerings that are offered through the deferred compensation program are taken out pre-tax. Roth contributions are taken out post-tax, and that's why the bill is needed. It also complies, you'll see, with federal law on 962. The other provision in the bill deals with qualified domestic relation orders that allows, again, in compliance with federal law, allows that funds to be, let's see what it says. To make distributions to an alternate payee in a qualified domestic relations order. which they're not currently allowed to do. So that's an explanation of the bill. Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I see our friends, PERS here. Is this the bill that we had talked about that was to help line with federal law? Okay. Are there any comments y'all have on this? Sure, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Blunt, for carrying this. Nothing much, just to add to that, like you alluded to just now, that this is being driven by recent changes in federal law associated with catch-up contributions. If they're going to be allowed, they have to be an after-tax option. So that's quadros, like you said, would be to allow PERS to be subject to the qualified domestic relation orders. Other than that, we'd be happy to answer any other questions, but really just want to ask for support.
Okay. Are there any questions on the bill? All right, seeing none for a motion.
Title sufficient do pass.
All right, motion is title sufficient do pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Senator Blunt, you're recognized to explain Senate Bill 2904, or if you want to defer to Director Higgins, whichever one you want to do.
Well, I'll do my best, but I'm sure Mr.
Go
Higgins
ahead.
can explain it better than I can. I'm trying to help, but he's the expert, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
So, okay, thanks. So what this bill, it just basically indicates that we would propose that if for a covered employer, if they leave PERS for whatever reason, whether they're sold, dissolved, privatized, whatever the case may be, that they would be required to pay their proportionate share of the unfunded liability. And that's currently not the case. That's really all this bill does, because otherwise, if that happens and that does not occur, then the system and therefore the state is faced with having to absorb that cost.
Could you give an example of what a scenario might look like, hypothetically speaking, just make up a scenario where this,
So similar, like if a private hospital, a local hospital that's in the PERS system, if they're sold or privatized, or maybe a local authority of some sort, but any type of institution like that, if they're dissolved, terminated, or sold,
dissolved, terminated, or sold?
privatized, whatever the case.
So what would happen with the PERS liability associated with that entity?
So unless the law has changed, right now there's overall for the PERS system, there's the unfunded liability. And we calculate that based on the accounting standards. We do the proportionate share for all covered employers. So that liability has been accumulated. And if a covered employer leaves and is not required to pay it, then the system and therefore the state essentially absorbs that unfunded liability. In other words, the remaining employers are left to cover that cost.
So if a local entity had, if the local government had a hospital, so to speak, I guess that's what the hot topic now is, and they close down, the state absorbs right now the state absorbs it?
Yes, essentially the system, and then I say therefore the state, since the state's a sponsor, but that's correct. The remaining employers in the PERS retirement system would absorb it. This law would require that they would have to pay their proportionate share of it.
What happens if they sell a hospital off to a private entity?
They, under this law change, it's our understanding that they would be required to pay their proportionate share to PERS. We become a creditor, basically.
Okay. So what happens if this law doesn't pass? What happens right now if a local entity sells off a hospital to a private or to any other
The
group?
system eats it.
Exactly. The system eats it, or the system absorbs it, as he said.
Okay. All right. Senator Johnson for a question?
Yeah, not to get too deep into it, but is it based on pro rata, or do you calculate the actual employees who have retired from there or scheduled to retire and their salary how does that?
It's performed by our actuary according to the GASB standards, and it's definitely a proportionate share, and I believe it's by the number of employees. I would have to look at that, but I can get you that information.
So if a hospital has a higher salary, average salary than the state, it would still be pro rata with what a state average is?
I think it would work out. Well, maybe not. We would need to, let me look at that report and circle back with you, but it's definitely a pro rata proportionate share based on their participation in the system.
And if a hospital closes because they don't have money, what happens then?
If they're a PERS covered employer, and then if they were closed and they no longer were a PERS covered employer, whatever their unfunded liability is, their proportionate share would be absorbed by the system.
So the county would not take on that responsibility?
Now, that may depend if it actually happened, and I would like to introduce Mr. Vetterli if needed, if it's agreeable, or counsel and policy advisor for more of the legal details. But I think that will just depend on what the circumstances are and who it is at the time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Simmons for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the added language on line 176, it starts on 174. And I think you may have already answered. But this applies to any state agency, school, political subdivision, so that'll be our counties, our cities, and as well as any employer who have these termination payments. Is that correct?
That's correct, if I understand right. And the termination payments would be referring to what we just described that would happen under this bill, should it pass.
So by amending the existing law by adding termination payments, that will actually make them responsible for the liability that you just explained.
That's right.
The other language in the bill is at lines 108 through 112.
That's correct.
And aside from what you just presented to the committee, there's nothing that we are doing to PERS as it relates to our retirees.
Yes, this does not affect retirees, certainly not directly. I mean, retirees are members of the PERS system, so this is in a way trying to help protect the system, therefore protect their benefit, but they're not affected by this. This has to do with covered employers and their payments.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any further questions on the bill? Senator Blunt for a motion.
Title sufficient to pass.
Motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. For motion, rise and report. All those in favor, say aye. All opposed? Ayes have it.